to this best practice. Welcome to this best practice session. Looking down the list of names, I can see quite a few haven't been before. I've been, I wouldn't say I volunteered, but somehow ended up with the task of setting up these best practice events across the network. I think this is our fourth or fifth one now, and they've been really well, gone really well, and they're across a whole host of things. Today's about accessing government funding. We've had them about online recruitment, sponsorship, all sorts of things. So these will be going on regularly. I'm trying to do one a month. So if you're a chief executive, lovely to see you, and you haven't got any other members of the team on, please do let me encourage you to share. And you know, if you're a member of the team, do make sure that all the details are passed on to you for future events, because it would be great to see you and any others in your team that you think would be relevant. So today is about accessing government funding. Some chambers have a lot of government funding, other chambers don't do any at all. Some do local stuff, some are just around skills, some big national contracts. So I thought today was an opportunity to bring four chambers together. That they're doing some things the same, but they're also doing quite a few things differently and on different scales. So today is not about hearing from me, it's about hearing from them. They're going to have roughly 15 minutes each to talk about what they do. So what I'll do is I'll get them talking one after the other. So please scribble down any questions you want to ask. And then when the last one's finished, which will be Tudor, it's open to you all to ask as many questions as you want, because it's all about learning from each other. Okay, so yeah, so that's it. So I'll introduce you now to our first speaker, who's Phil Smith from Business West. So over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Jo. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm delighted to share my scar tissue with you this afternoon. Despite 18 months of Zooming, I'm a technologically incompetent, so I've got Teresa, my PA, here just to help me share the slides. So Teresa, would you show me the first slide, please?
I think Teresa might need co-hosting rights if she hasn't got it already.
Thank you, Tudor.
Paul, you on the job there? Thanks, mate.
You threw me there, Phil, mentioning another name. There we go, Teresa, you should be able to do that now.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Could you make it one, explode it for me, Teresa, please, into a big slide? Okay, hopefully you can see that. So I've got 15 minutes to share with you Business West some experience with public sector contracting. I've got about 5 slides, one on why we do it, one on what we do, one on how we do it, and one on benefits and challenges. So on the why, we have a purpose of making this part of the world the best part of the UK to run and start and grow a business. That's why we exist. That's why I get employed. That splits into 3, from our perspective, 3 sub-purposes: to create the best place for business, create the best businesses, and obviously to create the best Business West Limited. And any public sector contracting we do has to support those. So if someone came along and wanted to do something that didn't fit those, we'd have to say no, despite its commercial attractiveness. Also, our current strategies for the next 3 or 4 years revolve around internationalization, around innovation, people and productivity, and around climate change. Again, as far as possible, I'd like to take on public sector contracts that support that strategy or those strategies. We have to be very careful at Business West. I'll tell you how much we take from public sector in a moment, but we don't let the PSC, I'll call it public sector contracting, tail wag the dog. You know, at some point you get these contracts that are very demanding, they're very big, they're very scaly, and if you're not careful, they can start take control of the business. So we pay a lot of heed to not letting it take control of the business. Next slide, please, Teresa. In terms of what we do, so there's our 21-22 revenue, roughly. So nearly 4 million comes from the DIT and associated ERDF contracts. Just over 3 million from Innovate UK and another national contract. We take about $250,000 at the moment from BEIS through Cavendish Consortium, which is a consortium of enterprise agencies and Business West on startup. And we take about £500,000 from local, from West of England Combined Authority, that is, to do skills. And we've just been awarded the one of the LSIP Trailblazers, which hopefully we'll all get next year. And that's probably worth something like the £500,000. So you can see there's about £8 million worth of our 10 million turnover. So 80% of my revenue comes from public sector contracts. So you can see why I'm concerned about the tail not wagging the dog. But that gives you a flavour of what we do. The rest, the other 2 million comes from probably about, I don't know, £1 million from membership and then maybe £1 million export docs roughly and that kind of stuff. Next slide, please. How do we do it? We've been doing it for a long time now, ever since I've been involved. I came originally from a business link, so I have lots of experience of running public money, and I've taken the scale that gave us and kept it. We're good at understanding what's deliverable in terms of timescales and targets, and mostly that's about reaching companies. We're getting better all the time about bidding expertise, answering the question, being professional at that. For taking the LSIPs, we need to recruit about 8 or 9 or 10 people, depending how much money we get from DFE. We're quite an attractive organisation to work for because we're B Corp. We're a Sunday Times Top Services 100. You know, competition is rife around the Bristol area where we're based, so we have to be an attractive place to recruit staff. We have about 230, 40 staff at the moment, been growing through COVID through the public sector. We have infrastructure scale. So in my accounts team of 6 or 7, the contracts team of about 5, an events team of 6, HR 2, marketing of 10. We have good platforms in terms of CRM and our data visualization and our ability to sense digital contracts and signatures everywhere. So that comes from the scale. We now have a trust record with government in terms of local and national for delivering and looking after their money well and delivering. And there's something there about Goldilocks positioning. We're not so big, we're not a Serco or a Capita. But we're not too little either. We've got some scale, so I think we're quite well positioned at the moment. Next slide, please, Teresa. The benefits, we've got 24,000 regular users. About 1,000 of those are members, but the other 23,000 are not members, but they use us every year for something. And that's really important for our marketing reach, our surveys, and our credibility for lobbying. So when I lobby, I don't lobby from 1,000 members. I lobby from 24,000 businesses. I've said something about the clean air zone or about Bristol Airport expansion or something. I said 220 staff and growing. It gives us some flexibility and built-in redundancies. So we're not kind of cut off at the knees if someone leaves us, and they do leave us. They often come back to Business West. We're an average payer, or maybe third quartile payer. People go and think they want to go away. They come back after 2 or 3 years. We're quite a sticky company. It's useful public sector contracting for amortizing platform and other overhead costs. So my costs, overhead costs, rental costs, CRM costs are good to spread over several contracts. Gives us great media gravity. We're the go-to organisation for BBC in the Southwest. If they want to do something about business, they come to us because we've got lots of stories, lots of case studies. And obviously gives some diversity to income sources. Income, it does provide an income. Some are less profitable than others, but they do generally provide contributions towards our policy, our marketing, research, our management, etc. So that's the benefits. There are some challenges. List of challenges there you will see. In no particular order. You can adopt, Business West sometimes can have a sort of contracting culture rather than an enterprising culture. Public sector contracts does bring a kind of a slavishness to the contracts, and therefore a slight PSC public sector tinge sometimes. And sometimes have to be very wary of keeping their jobs and growing their empires just to stay in a job, including me. I've been accused several times over 25 years I've been in charge of Business West of just keeping myself in a job. I deny that, but I have to be wary of just not keeping the scale to keep Phil or other people in jobs, or people growing their enterprise divisions or their innovation divisions just for scale reasons and not meeting that strategy. It can crowd out chamber membership and other commercial offers. If you're giving something away free paid for by Europe on export innovation, there's no chance in hell of offering it as part of the chamber membership or offer it commercially. On the other hand, I'd prefer to do it myself than have Serco or some other competitor do it. We're quite good here at linking up the chamber membership with public sector offers and vice versa. Cash flow demand, not for the faint-hearted. At some point about a year ago, I had 1.5 million out to I was bankrolling the EU by 1.5 million because they were slow in paying for some reason. So you need to have deep cash pockets to be able to take some of the bigger public contracts. You have to start getting expertise in matching and things like state aid. Taking things like DIT and Innovate UK, there's lots of brand cannibalization. They won't let you touch put Business West on anything they do. So lots of my customers only recognise DIT or Innovate UK and not recognising it comes from Business West stable. We try really hard to work around that, but you're fighting that, and also data. You know, if it's DIT data, you can't put it into your own data pool. Clearly, there are ways around that, but it does cause some kind of admin problems. Having £8 million of public money flow through you every year does demand audits, and obviously some of my senior management and my time is spent on public sector contracts. It absorbs you from other things, be it policy or member time or commercial growth. So there are downsides from that perspective. It does sometimes when we lost Business Link, I went from 300 staff to 200 to 100 staff, I think. So that was bloody about 15 years ago. So it does create need for HR flexibilities, redundancies, and recruitment. And you are, of course, at the behest of government U-turns, sudden policy turns on things like Business Link or DIT. Who knows what's going on with that, and whether there's going to be, you know, an ITA service at all next time round. So you are, that's to some extent at the prevail of the winds of the government's policy. Sometimes we get accused of trying to play both sides. You know, the WECA Chief Executive, the Combined Authority Chief Executive, has accused me of looking for contracts from her whilst sticking a sharp stick in her eye sometimes about things we don't like that they're doing. That's difficult. We're trying to rejig our branding a bit to make it clear when we're speaking as Business West Chambers of Commerce and when we're speaking as Business West contractor looking for contracts. I think my line there is we're not lobbying for ourselves. We're just reflecting the business opinion in our area. And if they don't want to listen to it, that's tough on them. And can I have a contract still, please, Patricia? But in all that, I am careful not to be over leveraged on public sector income. Whilst there's 80% of Business West income comes from the public in some shape or form, if it all went tomorrow, Business West would survive with a perfectly formed chamber policy, membership and export documentation team. So I think, you know, whilst it's big and scaly and that's the benefit, I am careful never to be kind of over leveraged. And I think that was the end of my very quick presentation. Q&A, I'll take at the end with everybody else, if that's right, Joe.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, Phil. Miranda, I know you were going to pop back home first. Are you home now and okay to join? No, I think I had a little message in the chat that actually.
Hi, Joe. I was anticipating being third, as that's what you put on the list, but I can easily stop and do it from here.
No, we'll make you third.
That's 20 seconds.
No, that's fine. You go. You go and. No, that's no problem. I'll put you third, and that'll give you.
I was going off your order of play, if that works.
I have. Yeah, I haven't got that on me, so I never realised that. So yeah, no, we'll put you third. That'll be fine. So if we go to Suzanne Caldwell from Cumbria Chamber. Don't you love it when things go well? Suzanne, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry, I was so focused on trying to share my screen that I forgot to. Anyway, let's see how it goes. So, having heard that first one, you think, oh, blimey, I think he said most of the things I was going to say. But anyway, we'll crack on, and I think it's probably good if we are all saying the same things. So, I just wanted to highlight a bit of the track record. So over the last 15 years, and interestingly, that's since Business Link closed more or less, we've done a whole range of European funding. We've done about 4 startup projects. We've done a number of it, we're about the 3rd iteration of ERDF Growth Hub projects, and we've done other ones focused on food and networking and various different things. We've also had a range of money when it was in existence from the North West Development Agency. We're a prime contractor for DWP, so we've run the New Enterprise Allowance Scheme since it was introduced. Currently we're running that across Cumbria, Lancashire and Merseyside, and we're also on their CARES Tier 2 as a prime, which is one we're particularly proud of and still amazed at winning, given that most of the others on the framework are people like, you know, Serco and Indius and G4S, and you go to meetings and you sort of wonder how you got there, but we did, and that's great. We've had money from DEFRA for Rural Growth Network. We've had money from BEIS. I forgot to put on there, we've had the Regional Growth Fund money when that was in existence for grants. We had money for Brexit. We've wish we hadn't now, but we actually have won various money on behalf of the LEP for them. And we were actually shortlisted in second place to deliver the National Business Support Helpline as well. And then various bits and pieces of funding from the LEP and from the local authorities. So it's everything ranging from sort of the odd 10-20,000 from a local authority up to multi-million projects. And I think the biggest one was the Rural Growth Network one, which had a range of different funding, and that was sort of 10 million or so. So that's what we do. In terms of my own track record, so I've been about 15 years with the Chamber, and before that, perhaps not surprisingly, I was also with Business Link. Prior to that, in industry primarily, and marketing, commercial and project management. I think that's all stuff that's actually really valuable when it comes to winning and running public sector contracts. I am a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, and I think that does mean that you can analyse people's requirements and write proposals that hit the buttons. And our hit rate on wins is in excess of 90%, which is something that we're very proud of. But similarly, we are picky about what we bid for. We don't just bid for anything that is anything that's going. So I think some of the following, you might feel it's a bit sort of trying to teach you to suck eggs, but I think that's because it is largely common sense. So again, don't chase the money, focus on what fits with your strategy and your capability. If you do that, it's going to add to the organisation, it's going to add to your aims, and you're not going to get distracted away from your core activities. The next one is making sure that you really understand what your customer is looking to buy or could be looking to buy, because there's two sort of different elements to this, isn't there? There's when people put out an opportunity to bid for something and they're very prescriptive about what they want, or you might be approaching somebody with an idea that you've had and trying to get some money for it. So it's about being very clear on what are they looking to buy, and when and that could be about what are they looking to buy in terms of precise services, or what are they looking to buy in terms of outputs and outcomes, and then you have to think about how you're going to deliver that. And then obviously you have to show really clearly in your proposal that you are delivering what they want and how you are going to deliver what they want. I think one that people often forget, regardless of how obvious it is read the exam question and answer the exam question, and answer them clearly and answer them concisely. And so many times I know if we've got people tendering into us, they just don't answer the questions, and you think, why can't you just answer what I asked for, because I can't mark what you've written. So that's a really, really important one. It's surprising how often people actually don't do that. As I say, answer it clearly and concisely and fully, but don't waffle, and emphasise the key points using things like sections and headings and underlinings and bold. Now, obviously, depending on word count, your ability to do that can be really restricted. It can restrict your ability to use things like bullet pointed lists and things like that. And that's when things like underlining and bold become particularly important. So get somebody else to read it, because if you read in your own work, you read what you think you've written, not what you've actually written. So it's really useful to get somebody else to look at it, sense check it, and see, have you missed something? Have you missed the point on anything? And is there anything else that you should add? Make sure that you meet the word counts, because people genuinely do cut off and stop reading when you get to the word count if they are marking them professionally, and certainly you know, if we ever find out that somebody has let somebody go past a word count, we put in an objection if we didn't win. So that is really important. And make sure that you follow the instructions for what you need to submit, what format and how. And again, it's surprising how often people don't do that, and then they miss out unnecessarily, even though they actually had a really good bid. So evidence of your track record and capability. I would always say find a way of highlighting it, even if it's not overtly asked for. So if we're answering questions, we always say, we would do this as we did for Y. So we always put in an example of a project where we've done it on to show that we have actually got the track record. And similarly, even if they don't ask you for what outputs you've achieved on another project, we would always try and say something like, you know, based on this project, we expect the outputs on this project to be this. So it's really underlying your past performance and your track record, not just saying how good you are. Never assume that people know you and what you can do. You'd be surprised what people forget or don't know about you, even if they know you well. And the other thing is, even if you've delivered for them before and they know exactly what you can do and how you do it, if they aren't marking this professionally and to the rules, they can only mark what you write. So whatever else they know about you, they shouldn't be taking that into account. So you do need to make sure you get it on that piece of paper and or into that presentation. We found that accreditations are really helpful in demonstrating your capability. So, you know, things like 27001, 9001, Cyber Essentials and the funder specific ones as well. And certainly we've learned a tremendous amount from our DWP delivery about operating. Although we got years and years of ERDF experience, we've really learned from the DWP stuff some really good stuff about how you manage partners and contractors, and you know, your auditing processes and all those sort of things. We've learned some really valuable stuff from them, and similarly we've learned some valuable stuff from them, despite the fact that we'd already got ISO 9001 and that. We've really learned some good stuff from DWP about continuous improvement too. So that's been an immensely valuable set of contracts for us. So, you know, use the learning from those accreditations as well. Don't just see them as I've got a box tick to show I can do, you know, quality systems. And again, as already been mentioned, you know, you need to be financially solid to do this. They don't always allow you to make money. Often they are cost recovery, like ERDF, and you know, quite a lot of the base funding that's about, they don't even allow you to get the overheads back that that ERDF does. So you know, they're not the you know, they're not the money maker that some people assume that they are, but that doesn't mean they're not worth doing, because they can contribute to overheads, they can contribute to the cost of staff members who you couldn't justify them as a whole person otherwise, and you wouldn't get them as a part-timer. And I mean, one of the main reasons that we do it is that we see it as really important in supporting our local business community, making sure that they've got the services that they need and deserve and that make a difference to them. And, you know, it's also useful in building the brand and building business engagement. Now, we have, and others have on occasion, managed to use public funding to dig ourselves out of a hole, but generally you do need to show that you're already financially solid, especially when you're bidding for the big money contracts. You know, we've had the same experiences on European funding. We've had money that we've been waiting for 18 months, 2 years, that's been sitting in MHCLG, and you know, and regularly you can be waiting 6 months plus, and we're just celebrating because we've got it down to the point where we get paid our claim before we have to put the next one in. But that still means that you know, you're not getting your January spend paid until June, July time. So it is, you know, it's a lot of money to have out. And, you know, particularly for the big contracts like DWP, you do have to demonstrate that you're not going to go bust. part way through the delivery. And they do some really robust financial modelling on you. So that is really important. And the other issue to be aware of with public funding as well is a lot of the time you do need to find match funding either from your own activity or from somebody else. And it is much harder than it used to be. I mean, back sort of 20 years ago, there were all sorts of scams, I suppose you could call them, that people would do where they were putting in, you know, in-kind stuff that wasn't really quite there, and it was a lot easier to do, but it is much harder than it was. I mean, one of the things that we do use a lot of now with European funding is beneficiary contributions as part of the income, and we do find that very helpful. But that can only be used in particular ways. It can't be used as income directly into your business. One of the things I think that we do have as chambers as a real example, as a real sort of plus point that we can use when we are seeking to get public funding is the whole thing about engaging clients and stakeholders, because this is something that should be a no-brainer for us as chambers. So we always emphasise the whole thing about heart of the business community and the huge engagement numbers and how we engage and these sort of things, and we certainly find that tremendously helpful. It's a great thing to have to be able to sell, and a lot of people don't. And what we do find is that quite a number of other organisations, they write into their bids that they're going to use us for their engagement without actually talking to us or offering us any money to do so. So we always watch out for that, and we generally write into our bids that nobody else has approached us and we're not going to help anybody else. And we certainly take every opportunity to call them out on it and point out that that they're not telling the truth. So because we have had quite a lot of issues with that in the past. Ask for feedback, even if it's not offered, and ask for feedback even if you win, because it is really useful in looking at what were the bits that they liked and that they marked you up on, and they're not always the bits that you yourself think. And what are the things that you fell down on. When you're doing the bidding, look at and understand the scoring and focus your efforts on the bits that are most important and are going to get you the most points, rather than wasting time on something that they are possibly not even going to mark. So that's that bit of it. Robust project management is absolutely fundamental unless you're doing the very smallest of projects. It's really helpful to be able to show it in the bidding, and it's absolutely invaluable in delivery. So be really clear on the outset on what you have to deliver and what the requirements of the contract are. Have a project plan, inception meetings, regular project meetings, have a quality plan, your marketing engagement, how are you going to monitor your customer satisfaction, how are you going to deal with complaints, having your paperwork in place, being clear what your processes and your customer journey are, how are you going to deal with claims and recording, what internal check-in processes have you got, and so forth. They really are invaluable, and getting it right from the outset is an awful lot easier than trying to backfit it when you discover that you should have had it. Exactly the same with making sure you've got really underpinning finance and recording processes. I really can't emphasise this enough. Again, it's a lot easier to think about it up front and implement it up front as it is to backfit. And then the other bit that's often forgotten is added value and social value. People are often looking for added value, and particularly in this public sector, they look for social value in terms of what you're doing about green things and employing young people and working with the disadvantaged and all these sort of things. So, think about what innovation you can bring and offer to what you're doing. What can you add on top of the core that they're looking to buy? And that's quite often an easy one for chambers, because we can all offer linkage into the chamber network, and that actually is a really big plus for most people. And in terms of social value, actually it's not as hard as you at first think. You know, it's things like, are you a disability confident employer? Do you employ apprenticeships? Are you signed up to the Armed Forces Covenant? Emphasising that you're a social enterprise, assuming that you are one. You know, those of us are SMEs, emphasising that we're SMEs, having the supply chain of SMEs, supply chain of local businesses, the green agenda. These are all things that are immensely valuable to the public sector. And that really is a whistle stop of that. And I'll just close by saying, I am happy to advise and help as long as you're not competing with us. Thank you.
I think you can be sure, at least down in here in Kent, we're not competing with you. Okay, we're quite a way apart. I can't speak on behalf of
I we're about to start delivering in London, so we're getting closer.
We keep a close eye, don't you worry.
Right now, how do I share? Oh, blimey.
Move the mouse to the top. There you go. You got it.
Thank you.
There you go. Actually, we'll put. I'm not sure if Miranda's ready yet. Oh, you are. There you are. She's ready now. So we'll hand over to Miranda Barker from East Lancs.
Oh, nice to see you. I'm not going to do slides, as you can tell, because I've just walked in the house. I was unexpectedly with one of our biggest companies today, who are putting quite a lot of land and money into a project we're doing. So I had to go there in the hope that I would get back here and see you in time. So this is building quite nicely, because what you're hearing is, I've just got an echo. Hang on, because my phone is still on. Let me just turn that on in a second. There we go. Sorry, I was just giving myself an echo back because I still have the phone on. This is building quite nicely, because what you're hearing is the expertise in terms of creating the funding and the kind of funding that's in there. And then from Suzanne, very much the methodology of how to apply correctly and make yourself the best possible case. So what I wanted to do was give you some of the sort of narrative behind the scenes that we've used. And I'm by no means saying this is necessarily going to win for everybody, but some of the behind the scenes influencing that we've carried out that has really sort of helped the funding succeed. So very much like you've already heard from Business West and from Cumbria, we've got a whole array of public sector funding. We've got part of the NEA contract, the New Enterprise Alliance scheme, that Suzanne's already mentioned. We've got some of the Department of International Trade funding, both directly. Sorry, I've got a dog squeaking. I think it wants to drink of water. This is very unprofessional of me, Jo. I'm terribly sorry. We've got part of the International Trade Department funding, both on a local Northwest basis as part of the Chamberlain contract, but then also on a Lancashire basis, and then on through the ERDF funding, and then also on as part of the Boost Growth Hub contract specifically for East Lancashire. So that's building all of those separate layers. We've also got some funding through a programme locally for delivery of skills, which is called Leading Lancashire. And but by and large, the majority of the funding we've got currently at the moment is based around low carbon technology support, where we're currently running ERDF funded programmes, which in total come to about 6 million over the course of 6 years. And we've then got 1.5 million from Robert Jenrick from the Getting Building Fund to run capital support for low carbon technologies. But the way in which we've got that is really building on what we've done before pre-chamber experience, which is very much building the relationships with the funders and trying to understand what they were trying to support. So it was really all about building those long-term relationships. So working with the local European structural funding teams, working with the local authorities, and more recently, of course, with the LEP, so that we really become a long-term partner for business engagement, but also, of course, in our case, for low carbon. So it was really about building those relationships. And that, obviously, the problem with that is that takes time. So this isn't offered as a potential short-term solution. But it is building those relationships so that, first of all, they're seeing you deliver the contract, but then you're working with them in partnership, often for no money, over quite a long period of time. but helping to then influence the actual plan which they're trying to put in place over a long period of time. So for instance, on the low carbon side in Lancashire, I chair the European Structural Funding Committee, but also the local energy and low carbon sector group for the LEP. So we're helping them scope where they want support in the future to come from and go to. So then when we're coming into the field to write those bids, it's very much scoped around those relationships. So it's about building the recognised competence in each of those fields. So we don't do a general business support piece with those funders. We very much stick to the fields in which they regard us as leads. So international trade, low carbon, and in some cases leadership and management training are really the areas where they regard us as leads for delivery in those fields. And so we try and understand what their aims are long term, and that's been important with the funding organisations as well as the local authorities. So directly with MHCLG, we've got long-term contacts personally with MHCLG, who we've involved in workshops with them over a long period of time, so that we have the same thought processes around what kind of funding bids they want to see and what actually don't work. We understand the subtext behind the C1s, C5s, etc., in terms of what they actually want to see and how they want to see an economic benefit, and where you get certain institutions which they think are not good value for money in terms of economic benefit as regards to those they do see as good value for money. So it's really been trying to sort of understand what they want and help, to be honest, shape their thinking around what's going to work long term. And this is where you get the difficulty with the changing funding bodies over the number of years, is you lose that expertise. And I would say it is around expertise when it comes to funding sources, because we've had persistent failures in other areas and persistent successes in certain areas. Just some points just around the making income from schemes, as Suzanne referred to. It's been terribly difficult in recent years to make. Sorry, the dog is shouting for no reason. It's been much harder in recent years to make income from European structural funding than when we could use in kind in the same way. But we still have a good track record of how to make what is effectively income from European structural funding. So looking at how you put the spend together so that you're funding not only dedicated staff, but also percentages of staff throughout the organisation that have some time spent on that project. So looking at how we're using resources. So we wouldn't be putting another bid in for European structural funding unless I knew we were going to get a baseline benefit cash flow wise for the chamber. I wouldn't be doing it otherwise. And at some point in the future, if you want, we can look through a breakdown of costs and spend on certain projects so that we can see how that might work. And there'll be some great examples from around the network on how to do that. And the same thing with building relationships with claim teams. So for instance, this week we put our low carbon claim in, which was about £109,000, went in on Monday, and we received the clearance this morning at 9 a.m. that it's going for payments. So that's literally 4 days turnaround, and it'll now be in the bank in 7 days time. So it's about that relationship building and that coaching of them over a long period of time. So what I'm saying, unfortunately, is that works in a narrow range of things with people that you're able to do that with. But it's something that we would definitely be looking to try and build that connectivity with wherever the funding is coming from next. And that's my question going forward, is where do we see the funding coming from next? I obviously don't want to see it coming from organisations that aren't going to want to work with chambers. And I would be happier in our circumstance if it came from, for instance, if it came through the local authorities rather than it coming through LEP, etc. I would have that long-term relationship with them. And that's where we want to go forward. So just in terms of where our headlines of things we're doing next, we've got community renewal funding in with the local authorities in 4 areas to do something jointly, and we're hoping again to keep building on that low carbon specialism. So that's really hopefully some additional narrative to what you've already had around how we've made those things work. I hope that's helpful, and I'm sorry for the noises.
Thank you, Miranda. Obviously, we'll have the Q&A at the end. And also thank the dog. The dog made some really interesting points there. So thank you. I think we've all been there, no problem. And now finally to hand over to Tudor Price, who's my Deputy CEO here at the Kent and Victor Chamber.
Thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, and colleagues. Nice to see you all. Thank you very much for those presentations that have gone before, many of which, most of which, of course, have covered off things that I was going to talk about. So I've been hurriedly editing my slides in the background as we've been talking. Just picking up some points. The climate has been good for chambers to bid into opportunities. Phil mentioned it. I too served my time with Business Link, and then obviously was there to switch off the lights. And that left quite a nice void in terms of it was a free-for-all. So if you had a way with words and a couple of hours spare, you could put in bids for all sorts of funding opportunities. So the climate has been good over the last decade. How long that will remain, based on those of us that are long enough in the tooth, things tend to go in cycles. And there is certainly sort of a lot of review going on around business support. So there is always the risk with public sector stuff that they could decide to reinvent the Business Link, and then of course that will just monopolize the landscape and make it really difficult for those who aren't successful in delivering that sort of contract. So I think just remember the context, and like anything, look long term at these sort of strategic opportunities, but also some of the risks as well out there. For our part, we currently deliver the Growth Hub in Kent and Medway. We also have had a succession of ERDF contracts. We've currently just got a new one, which is a continuation. We have a local authority, we have service level agreements with the local councils. That's actually quite helpful, because going back to the point that Miranda was just saying, you have far more flexibility and far more ability to influence the outcome of some of those based on relationships and sort of conversations you've had before. The further up the sort of hierarchy you go, the more technical and more procurement based it becomes, and it's really just about answering the exam question and getting across the line. So having a few SLAs is a great place to start. We started off quite early. I joined back in 2011 post Business Link. We had one SLA. We very quickly expanded that to 3 or 4 SLAs, 6, 7, 8, and eventually we had a whole load of sort of SLAs with local councils across Kent. So we sort of built up our knowledge, our experience, and our expertise. But looking back at it now, that flexibility is something we yearn for. We can pick up the phone and say, market's changed, not going quite the way we thought it was. Can we just adjust our SLA? Whereas, of course, you could never think or imagine doing that with an ERDF contract. So you've sold your soul at the outset, and therefore you have to deliver regardless of whether the environment's changed around you. We too have also been very successful, much to our surprise, on the LSIP Trailblazer as well. So we now have the skills work to sort of add to our portfolio stuff. But yeah, it's been an interesting time really. And again, adding a note of caution here. So the good performance doesn't guarantee repeat business in this environment. You know, you can do a fantastic cracking job, whether it's ERDF or whether it's UK government contract. That's it. Once the intervention's done and that economic achievement has been made, doesn't matter, the contract's gone, and you're not necessarily going to get it again. That's why I say at a local level, SLAs, local councils, far more of an opportunity to shape and change things and respond to need, rather than sort of rely on some of the larger contracts that may come around again and again, because they might not. They could just be turned off overnight, as we well know. So I'm just going to share a few slides just with my thoughts on what we've got so far and why you might want to do this. Okay. So why do it? Well, first of all, again, does it add value to the chamber? Because we always tend to sort of look at it and say, well, okay, is it actually anything that we would want to be associated with? Is it something good for the chamber to be involved with? Is it the right sort of thing to be involved with? And secondly, does it actually make any money? Some of the bids that come out, they are incredibly cost focused, very, very competitive, and actually you have to be very careful that you are going to make some profit out of this. Don't be afraid to actually put in profit into your bid. Make sure it shows. They accept that. But even if it doesn't make money and it breaks in the cost, is there actually some added value? Will you make some return elsewhere? So it's not always necessarily about bottom line. It does actually. So sometimes you get the sort of indirect profits elsewhere. Will it actually help you grow? At the end of that contract, will you be further forward than you were when you started, in one form or another? If it's just a sideline, and a lovely expression was sidelines are slide lines, which basically means if you sort of pursue something just because it's there and on the table, you can end up finding yourself, you suddenly become involved in booking all the local performance and street art because that was the contract you went for, and now you're involved in that because you'll be remembered and associated with that particular piece of work evermore. So will it actually help you grow as a chamber? And the one that Joe and I struggle with always is what would happen if someone else does it? And unfortunately, that human nature and this thing, oh, I don't want a eye patch. No, 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 I don't want Serco in here. Oh, no, thank you very much. And you find yourself going for it just because you're more worried about what happens if someone else does it. So it's helpful to get another point of view on things externally, just to sort of try and keep you level-headed, because otherwise you get incredibly competitive and think, not on my patch, Gov. And that can sort of lead you to making all those wrong sort of decisions. Okay. Sectors, consider carefully which sectors you're going to choose, because contracts come out, and obviously, like many of you, we are subscribed to all the various portals and opportunities come, and depending on the time of day and what you've got lined up before, what you've been doing, you look at something and oh, that could be something, and that could be something could be sort of quite problematic. So you have to sort of think very carefully, going back to those original questions you've asked yourselves about why you're doing it. So generally speaking, we tend to look at things business support, low carbon, anything that involves SME engagement, which is where our strength is and where we think, okay, we can put forward a good argument for this, and we have the wherewithal to be able to do it. Skills, but very much with an SME focus as opposed to education. Education and schools is, okay, there's a value in it, I can understand that, but we took the view that people going to school and learning about the chamber will forget about us by the time they're in the workforce. However, working with the university students, different case, because they will think well of the chamber, come out into the workforce and know who the chamber is and what the chamber is. So there's a legacy and a sort of heritage value to that side of it. So that's the only sort of education we like to get involved with. We've done stuff before, it's really hard. We're never quite sure where the value is in it to the chamber, other than perhaps being seen to be helping. But long term, does it really help us grow as an organization? Not for us. So skills is really very much about the adult side of things and working with SMEs. Similarly, unemployment. If it's about enterprise and startup, then again, yes, it sits very nicely with what we're trying to do, and we feel what our chamber is all about. But supporting unemployment generally and getting people off the job queue, unfortunately, our experience has been, first of all, they're very, very large contracts. They tend to sort of be fairly competitive. It really is just a numbers game. The outputs aren't always appreciated fully. They are very much a case, we don't want people claiming benefit. How can we find a way of giving them something else to do? So it's all about getting them off the unemployment line. And you can sort of spend a lot of time and effort working on that with again, very little return for the chamber in the long run. And of course, international trade sits well. The size of the contracts mean that we are probably out of the running because the size of who we are, and we'd have to put together a fairly large consortium. But it's an obvious one because it sits alongside what we do. So we tend to sort of focus on business support, skills, and international trade are the ones we like to go for because they sit alongside what we think, the direction of travel and where we want to see our chamber grow. So the approach we take to bidding is, and how we do these things is, first of all, bearing in mind this all could be gone and wrapped up and there'll be no trace of it in 2-3 years' time, do it as standalone. Make sure you've got the resources, make sure you've employed people, put them on temporary contracts and use subcontractors. The reason we use subcontractors is, of course, is a great way of sharing wealth and building reputation and building relationships going forward. So we have a lot of business advisors and consultants and HR specialists, many of whom now subcontract for us on these contracts. And of course, they all join the chamber because they want to be involved in with an opportunity. There is a sense that actually, if you want to get in on the act, then you ought to be joining the chamber because they have these contracts they can sort of share and pass on to you. So it has that indirect sort of wealth generation. So it's really about making sure we're not taking food off the dinner plate of our members. So if you've got training companies on board and you've got a training contract, by all means coordinate, manage and engage, which again where our strength is, but actually in terms of the actual delivery, it's smarter, I think, to use, if you're allowed to, of course, it's smarter to use your membership because they will sort of obviously then not see you as a competition. And we will have that problem, I think, when we're trying to deal with members is trying not to compete in areas that members are there. So we always try and work with some contractors where we can, share the wealth. as I say, include profit. Number of procurement people we've spoken to, they're quite happy. They'd much rather see the profit line there. Not huge, you're never going to get a lot. You're lucky to get into double figures sometimes, but show it in there, and at least you know what it is you're going to take. So that helps with the open book reporting, which 99% of all contracts are now, where you have to sort of show what your expenditure has been. We don't see many more ERDF or European funding programs now. They tend to be sort of legacy funds, which are sort of rolling on from the last round. But beware of match funding. We have two very significant stories here in Kent, one of which was around a previous business link contract provider who got too clever with playing off their match funding. One using the contribution from the client to act as match funding for another contract they were bidding in for and all the rest of it, and bang. 3 years later, MHCLG rocked up and said, we'd like £400,000 back by Friday. And that was the end of them, toast. So be very aware of match funding. It can work, as Miranda was saying. So, there are some costs and profits to be had there, but you do need to make sure you are very clear about what it is you're doing and how this is going to expose your business. And do not try and get too clever with it, because it can fail miserably. Where you can benefit, of course, bearing in mind you've got standalone payroll and stuff, is the assets and resources. Obviously, you need a new set of laptops for this new contract you're taking on. You need to upgrade your IT system in order to deliver. So actually, there are some direct benefits that you can bring to the chamber, the core chamber, without having to sort of play the books too much. And finally, really, in terms of being success, when you're putting a bid together, pick your team. As you know, we favour working with subcontractors and members. We try and share the wealth. Eventually, that love comes back to us later on when we're not delivering the contract. Our strength is, and our perceived strength, and I would say the same of all chambers, is our ability to engage with the SME community. They see that as being the key. And therefore, make sure that you big that up, make sure you have full control of that and build on that. But essentially, you have opportunities to subcontract and work with partners to give you that strength and give you that sort of cross-region delivery model. Always get an external review on your bid. I think it was, so I think it's Phil probably mentioning about the exam question. You've got to make sure that you are answering the exam question. It's very easy to get lost as you get into this sort of waxing lyrical about how wonderful the chamber is and its heritage and its legacies, and we are the voice of small business, and we've got red underpants and we fly through the sky, saving business from disaster. Actually, it's really helpful to get another pair of eyes and go, didn't answer that. Where's that? And especially if now in word counts, everything's constrained to sort of 500 words or 1,000 words. You really need to make sure you've got it getting across the points that have been asked for. Focus on your strengths. Business voice is being the key one. And if you go in for it, deliver to build your reputation. So don't go in on a wing and a prayer. Make sure you can deliver on this, because the people will remember. And of course, the legacy will follow you around if you haven't done a good job on it. You will always be pointed at, and there will be your doubters, because of course, some people just don't like to see the chamber succeeding. Certainly if they're a business organization, they like to see others, and they'll always call foul. But generally speaking, if you do a good job, it will carry with you and carry weight later on. And if you decide to go for it, you've got to be in it to win it. So once you decide you're going to go for it for all the right reasons, make sure you commit. Don't do a half-assed attempt. You really have to make sure you set aside time, you cram. Unfortunately for me, it's always weekends is when I get the best time to think. So my boss, Joe, is very kind, gives me time off to catch up, because I just crash one weekend after another. But you have to really make sure you apply your time and you give yourself the absolute best possible chance that you get in it. There's nothing worse than being seen sort of as a half-hearted attempt and a little pat on their head, patronizing chamber. Well done, they did ever so well, but just not professional enough. We are no more, no less professional than Serco and all the other teams out there. They've just got a little bit more time and resource. So all we've got to do is create that resource and time, and you can do as good a job as they are. So those are my top tips for you. Hopefully, with all of our information, you have found this of use, and happy to take any questions along with the other speakers here today.
Thank you, Tudor. So that's all of our speakers. Thank you all very much. You're all very successful in what you've done, and actually there's some commonality across what all of you have said today. And what really resonated with me was one of the first things that you put up, Phil, which was, about being aware not to crowd out membership or your commercial offers, because I think that's something that, all of us are really very aware of with some of these contracts. And Tudor and I battle it very often because we have the contract for the growth hub. And that sometimes can conflict if we're not careful with what we do as a chamber, but actually it works in our favour that we can turn things round by the fact that we do have the growth hub. So let's open it up for questions. So either put your hand up and I'll read it from there, or just wave at me on the screen and we'll go over to questions. I'm sure you're not all stunned to silence. Okay, well, while you're thinking about it, I'll ask one to each of our speakers, only because, simple fact, we're reviewing it. Obviously, to have all these contracts, there's a lot of data that you need to input. There's a lot of reporting and things you need to extract out. So having the right CRM system is really important. So if I start in the order of the speakers, Phil, what CRM system do you use for your work?
Well, that's way above my pay grade, Joe. I don't know, but I know it's running out of steam in the next 18 months, so we just started a big capital project to retender and rescope it. It's going to cost, over £100,000 to rescope it. Lots of the detail of our CRM system, however, is not for public sector contracts. It's for membership, which demands more of our CRM system than some of the public sector reporting, because it's a bit more interactive. But sorry, I can't answer the technical question.
That's okay, no problem. What about you, Suzanne? Can you answer the technical one?
Yeah, probably not in the most technical way, but so we run a separate CRM system for our chamber membership, and for the where we run the CRM systems for our own delivery, we use Microsoft Dynamics, which is quite easy to tailor to your requirements, and it is a relatively easy one to use. But obviously, some of the funders do have their own specific requirements. So, for example, for DWP, we have to use their PRAP system as well as our own, as well as our own CRM. And for the work that we do for the LEP, we have to put in their system.
Thank you. And Miranda?
Yes, I'm similar to the other answers, really. We at the moment still have Chamber Track, although over the next 3 or 4 months, we're going over to Ruby. We haven't made those decisions based on running public sector programs. They've been made based on membership, on having proper linkages between membership and invoicing and events. So it's a whole membership and finance interaction, and then making sure that CRM system works properly with the documentation and the international trade. So I wouldn't have said we would have paid a lot of attention to the project management of public sector contracts when it came to our own internal CRM, because most of that is just the simplicity of, can we properly extract the financial codes in the right way, which we can do under the system we are on under now financially, because we're also moving from Sage across to Xero and Ruby simultaneously. So the finance system is more the one that we need to interact properly with the claim submission procedure, because that's the hardest bit that we have to do, is the extract and spend on the various lines. But Suzanne's right, one of the headaches is one of the headaches is we have to interact with the customer's solutions, so we have to input onto Evolutive.
Evolutive, okay. And finally, over to you, Tudor.
Yeah, we're our company CRM is Goldmine, but that's not necessarily sort of standing up to scratch these days for as a business. Obviously, with multiple departments and interests, we're looking at HubSpot at the moment as an alternative, because it's very much a sort of sales membership sort of focus. Yeah, we're finding more of the contracts that come our way now. They're requiring us to use their own CRM which is a bit of a headache in terms of sort of being able to sort of share data and stuff like that. But it goes back to the idea of being set up as standalone sort of contracts with you know, sort of a bit of a firewall between us and the business. So it doesn't really matter what they're doing because it's sort of outside of our chamber CRM. But yeah, it's becoming more common, I think, where local authorities and government bodies are seeing the value of you know, that database growth, and so actually getting us to use their CRMs, you know, they tend to prefer that now.
Thank you, Tudor. And Vic, you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, if that's okay. Sorry, so I've got to press a mute button, turn off the fan, make sure the camera's up. Right, okay, I'm ready to ask a question. So Phil, what came first, the money or the capacity? So there you are, you're bidding for all these fantastic sums of money and massive amount of work, which of course require you to have a deep cash flow. Or did you have the capacity and then you started to slowly pick up work, or did you, I don't know. So that's your question, but hang on, sorry, if I may, I'll just rattle off my 4 questions for each of you, if that's okay, because I'm sure I'm going to lose my connection. Suzanne, you said you'd objected to some contracts. Have you ever done that successfully, and doesn't it leave a bad taste with the people you're bidding with? Miranda, oh, Miranda, please show us the dog. We all need to see the dog, but that's not the question, okay? The question is, what's the cost of your new CRM, which also I'm going to ask Tudor if you're thinking about a new system. And Tudor, for you, because you're using subcontractors and short-term staff, are you having any staffing resourcing issues? Because we can't get staff for love nor money. So those are my questions. And if that's okay, if I ask all 4 at once, you could then perhaps pick them off in order, if that's okay. And then I'll think up some new ones, if that's all right.
Super efficient, Vic. Phil, I'll go first. So probably scale came first. So when Business Link closed down, I was left with, I don't know, 15,000 customer records and quite a lot of staff and money that was the sort of hangover from closing down. So that we had the resources and we had a UKTI DIT contract then, and it grew from there. It has been you know, an up and down road, as I said, with losing some things, and then LEPs come in and sort of lunch for a bit. But actually, I think given that we are, you know, with our scale of 24,000 real contacts, and yes, people, public sector contracts do want their data these days, but they don't do anything with them. You know, data manipulation and use is a real art, and I think we've got quite good at it. And it's all very well putting your data and evidence onto DIT CRMs, but they do bloody all with it, as it were. So I think we're very good now at data manipulation and data presentation. But scale came first, Vic.
Okay, I think Suzanne, your question was next.
Yeah, and I'm very well timed because my dogs have just barked and ran out the room before I unmuted. So, right, just pinching the previous question first, I think is actually we started with the capability, but not the scale, and built it up over time. But moving on properly to my own question in terms of objections, we have objected and we did stop somebody else from winning a contract. Unfortunately, it didn't actually then mean that we won it, but at least it stopped somebody who was a lying, cheating little sniveller who we hated winning a contract that we knew we wouldn't deliver very well. And it did put a real marker down that people had better stop messing and had better start marking their, within the local authorities had better start marking their, marking the bids properly and be a bit more professional. So it was, we're pleased we did it, and it hasn't had any long-term repercussions. We've won bids off those same people since then, and the people that we objected against have gone out of business.
I think to me, it shows that you know your worth.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And Miranda?
Just go to Tudor 1 second, because I'm just asking the question of our finance team. So come back to me in 1 second.
Okay, Tudor?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So money versus capacity. Again, we're like Suzanne, we sort of started small, really. We've been able to cash flow each one as they've grown up. So we haven't had to, and on a couple of occasions, because we've been dealing with either local, either the district or county council, we've been able to sort of say, you know, a bit of an implementation fund, you know, a bit of a sort of upfront cash just to sort of help get things going. it gets more tricky. Obviously, the larger ones we're picking up, there's very much a case of having to soak up that cash flow, and some very close conversations between myself and to the finance and Joe, making sure that you know the first month, 2 months is we can sort of bankroll that okay without any issues. CRM, HubSpot at the moment we're looking, it's about 20 grand for the year, so it's a license fee. That's the sort of cost, but we're sort of fast approaching that sort of level with, if not slightly more actually, if you take into account our current CRM, Goldmine, plus all the integrations we now have with Lead Pages and our website and all the other bits and pieces, you know, the SurveyMonkey and all the other sort of bells and whistles you tend to have. Looking at HubSpot, what we find actually a lot of that's already built in the package, so actually we'll make some savings elsewhere. But yeah, 20 grand for the year for a CRM of that
Per
caliber.
year. Every
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Again, we were able to benefit obviously because some of that cost, you know, we can offset against the contracts we're running at the moment. So we break that down into an annual cost and then charge per seat. So if we've got 5 or 6 people of seats taking place in our Growth Hub contract, we will, you know, obviously claim a percentage of that back as well. Contracts, we don't object. We're very nice. We smile politely and go, okay, well, you know, if you need help, we'll come, you know, we'll be here. Fortunately, you know, those that have got it have failed spectacularly, so we've been okay. Well, the irony is, of course, they come and contact you 3 or 4 weeks later and go, we could do with some help. Would you like to subcontract for us? And of course, we're yeah, sure, at a price. But yeah, so no, we try and be magnanimous in loss. And staffing issues, yeah. We've been doing this for a little while, so we have a bank of freelancers in terms of the advisors and the sort of people, the delivery people. So we can sort of wind them up very, very quickly. And in fact, that was a massive asset to us at the beginning of the pandemic. When it all kicked off back in March, lots of the businesses were ringing HMRC and the Business National Helpline and couldn't get through because it was obviously being swamped. We got a couple of phone calls from local authorities saying, look, we're getting inundated with calls. There's only 2 or 3 of us and a dog. You know, we're struggling to handle it. Can you help if we pay you some funding? Can you sort of help take some of the calls? Very quick phone calls to all 13 districts, realized they were in the same boat. And we were able to set up our own helpline locally within 48 hours, I think it was 3 days. And we've handled 19,000 calls since then. And that, because we had the advisors, I could get on the phone and said, I need you, are you available? Obviously the rate was a little bit higher than I would have liked to have paid, but you know, it's a fire sale, so I had to go with what they had. But we were able to get that capacity very, very quickly, and I think that's enabled me to be able to bid in for, we've got one in with the UK CRF, the Community Renewal Fund, on the basis that I've got nothing in place now, but I know that if we're successful, I can get on the phone and rush like that. Where I do struggle, and this is probably where you're experiencing, is on that sort of the administrative staff, in the in-office stuff, actually getting people who are full-time doing that sort of thing. We have a very good relationship with the universities, as I mentioned. One particular thing, we work very closely with the internship program they have at the University of Kent. We've employed, I think, 2 of the last interns that we've had, and we've got 2 with us at the moment who are also sort of shaping up to be ideal in terms of us taking on. So the timing of that tends to fall in line with when contracts come out, so the financial year. So far, and I would say it is luck more than my judgment, we've had interns working with us when these contracts have come on, and we've been in an enviable position to say, would you like to stick around and work on this contract with us? And of course, it's been a great start for them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just spell out, first of all, when Tudor says that we're magnanimous in loss, what he really means is that he puts the phone down, shuts his door, goes red as a beetroot, stamps his feet, has a fit, and then he's okay. That's what he really means, isn't it,
Thanks
Tudor?
for that. Thanks, Joe.
Miranda?
Well, first of all, here is the dog that's been driving us all mad, which is now being silent, of course, that it's actually been asked to appear on camera. And so, first of all, in terms of CRM, Ruby is going to cost us, depending on which pieces we finally bolt on in the first year of taking it, between 9,500 and 12,500 to do the transition. The extra piece, the extra 3,000 is because it's doing the integration with our finance system, and then it will cost us about £9,000 per annum. It's not considerably more than chamber track that we're using now. But of course, we're having difficulty with the chamber track because it's gradually winding down. They've got less and less ability to actually make it do what we want it to do. So the annoyance has pushed us to do this. You could also, I think, probably ask Jeff from North and West Lancs about the one they've had made for them, which and how that's working and is it in place yet? Because that's very interesting from a CRM point of view. Just from a project capability and capacity and what comes first. With most things like international trade, NEA, all of the business engagement side of things, it's a question of we've got some capacity, we've definitely got the capability, we've got the contract, and then gradually one goes up like this if it expands. With low carbon, that was a standing start. So we went from having the intellectual capability in terms of the areas of expertise, but no physical capacity to deliver it. So that was a build from a standing start, first with a project department head, and then gradually filling the staff, working in partnership with North and West Lancs and helping them get equipped staff-wise as well, and then building the outside resource of people. Since then, obviously, we've gone on to do a CRF bid in this field for East Lancashire with the priority areas. And that's going to be trading on the fact we've got some existing capability to then build some more. But we have done things from a standing start and we've set up effectively a new department.
Right, Joe, sorry for asking so many questions, but thanks all of you for fantastic answers, really helpful. I love the dog.
No problem, Vic. We've got a question now for Suzanne from John. John, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, Suzanne, as part of your presentation, you mentioned beneficiary contributions. I'd quite like to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so this is something that we use on our ERDF funding. So we're a 60% area. What we do is we put in like grant schemes for consultancy and or some small revenue spend. So the businesses have to put in 60%. We give them a 40% grant and we keep that 20% as a contribution towards the costs of running the project. If you'd like to know any more on that, I'd be more than happy to share the details of it and the paperwork and everything with you. Just give us a shout.
Yeah, I'd really like to see that. Thank you very much. If I shove my email address in the chat.
No probs, John, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Okay, has anyone else got any questions they would like to ask?
Joe, I put some stuff in the chat and thanks very much for those who've come back. They're asking about the changing environment around public funding at the moment. If there's a LEP review, there's the impending end of ERDF. And what I was interested in was about, are these almost macroeconomic changes that are taking place in terms of the funding environment? Are some of the chambers who presented today, is that having an impact on their methodology in terms of how they're bidding for opportunities, how they're exploring new opportunities? Is this going to cause a radical shift in how those public sector funded projects are going to be acquired in the future? Or is it going to be more of the same, albeit in a slightly different repackaged way?
Okay, who would like to go first? Tudor?
Yeah, good question, Paul. I think I mentioned obviously that in my mind, the climate has been good for chambers and other business organisations bidding in, because it's been fairly disparate and disorganised. It's been very much a silo approach. Here's a funding pot, open the gates, who wants to go for it? And that's left it wide open and a very competitive, and I guess you could argue, depending on which side of the fence, from government's point of view, it's offered some value for money in terms of being able to get the most variety of choice. What seems to be going on from what I can see, and there is a clear agenda within BEIS, or certainly within parts of BEIS, to try and claw back to the business link ambition, because they liked that engagement, they like the ability to be able to draw on the data and be able to sort of get intelligence, and the ministers are asking questions, and of course BEIS can say, yes, we know that 35% of people are struggling to export at the moment, and so on and so forth. So I worry a little bit that the sort of business support review is moving in that direction. Interesting, Miranda was just commenting on a question about LEPs and the LEP review. And I think probably one of the the pieces of comfort I take from the changes that are happening at the moment is that it looks like the SPF, Shared Prosperity Fund, is going to come down through local authorities, which we all have a far closer relationship with than we do at a departmental level. So I think whilst on one hand we may see this centralization again, and again that cycle of satellite back to centralization, satellite back to centralization, I think we will see actually the people that we can get closer to will be the ones that will have the say on this sort of thing. So there is opportunity, but it is definitely in a state of change. Yeah, I think it's my strategy really, or my sort of direction of travel is going to be around staying local. I think I'm going to stay within the county, try not to go beyond that, make sure that I can work with the local authorities and tie up that relationship really tight, build the trust and confidence. And even large outsiders, because there's the Growth Hub, which was a very popular one, a lot of sort of consortiums trying to sort of buy into those wholesale. We were really able to just shut the door on them in terms of our local engagement and connectivity with the local business community. And so we need anchor in on those points, and I think you'll probably always be on safe ground.
Miranda?
Yes, thank you. I agree with what Judah's been saying. I've heard too from a source just yesterday that the UK SPF is going to come through local authorities, not LEPs, and that would give me a degree of comfort, because they are the ones we have the big long-term relationships with. They're not going anywhere, as opposed to LEPs, and also they are. I think they regard, certainly in Lancashire, chambers as routes to business engagement, whereas LEPs might think of 10 different places, potentially including chambers. So I think that's a positive move if that's what's happening. I am nervous about the potential review simultaneously of business support and international trade support, and the fact that they might bundle all that together into one type of methodology, and that might start with a national hotline, and then thinking that they can provide local advice through a national hotline as to what's available in a local level. And we know that you can't even do that within a county, let alone across the UK, and be accurate. So that's my worry, is if there are sweeping changes where they try and do as much as they can through a central port of call and then a national contract with someone like EY, and that there is the potential for them to try and put both those systems together, and we would then lose a whole swathe of potential both business interaction, but also sort of paid for support in one fell swoop, and that's a real danger, I feel. But if things are coming through the local authorities, then I'm happy to keep on working at those relationships at local level and county level, so they see chambers as the route to business engagement.
I think there's something with the business support review and the LEP review. It's something that we all need to really keep a close eye on, because from our perspective, our LEP covers Kent, Essex and East Sussex, one of the largest LEPs. And probably, I would say, up to now, 90 or if not 80% of what they've done has been all around the funding and the projects, and coordinating the projects and the funding for the 3 counties. Well, now, that we know that's going down to a local level. So where does that leave our LEP? What is the role for them? And the role they're carving themselves out at the moment, their areas they see as their areas of expertise, are actually one of the areas of expertise of the chamber.
Joe, still here. I'm picking up from my contacts that the Treasury are not in favour of LEPs, whilst LEPs have fought quite hard to protect themselves and to some extent MCLG, I'm picking up the Treasury don't like LEPs. They think they are inefficient, and I think the LEP review was looking quite bloody, so I heard, but it was kind of postponed till after the recess because it was quite bloody. So I think we will see major changing in LEPs going forward.
I think that's what we need, because the last thing we want them is just to try and turn themselves into business support organisations. Because since the demise of Business Link, we have built that, we have gone nicely into that slot. And I think, if anything, they need to be doing is supporting those on the ground that can actually deliver, which we've just proved this afternoon. Chambers can deliver and deliver well. So we've probably got time for one more quick question, if anybody has anything. No hands up. Okay, I'll go through our speakers. Phil, is there anything else you would like to add before we go?
Just one little point about when companies get used to having free support, be it from DIT or ERDF or Shared Prosperity Fund, sometimes they kind of hang around. They come to, we start doing commercial services, sell the same thing. They say, well, we'll wait 18 months because we know there'll be a free service coming up in 18 months from somewhere else. So it doesn't help all the crowding out the public sector. You know, sometimes it's market failure, sometimes it's crowding out, but it doesn't help getting commercial offers off the ground.
Very true. Tudor?
I was just going to, Phil, so empathise with that. The number of times it's got, oh, there's nothing coming up. Right, let's get our commercial service. No, oh, there's another one. Bugger. Wrap that one. I'll put it back on the shelf. So yeah, really, really frustrating trying to do that. One thing, if you're thinking of anything, and don't steal my idea, but you're welcome to share on it, is accreditation. If you remember the SVEDI, Small Firm Enterprise Development Initiative, accreditation of business advisors, because there's plenty of them out there. We're using lots of contractors, and we were thinking actually that could be quite a nice little sideline to get involved with. So accreditation is a possible route to follow to generate additional income alongside what it is we're doing. But in terms of parting sort of thoughts really, or parting advice, build your database. The biggest thing that we are known for is our business engagement, rightly or wrongly in some cases. So if the opportunity is there, make sure you are building your database and your engagement as much as you can through these contracts, because ultimately that will be your biggest asset and USP when you're bidding for stuff.
Thank you, Tudor. Suzanne?
Yeah, I mean, just reflecting really what was said about it conflicting with commercial activity. It absolutely does. We always just sort of take the view that if we're not delivering it, somebody else would be delivering it. So at least if we are doing the delivery, we've got some chance of moving people through into some other chamber services along the way.
Yeah, very true, very true.
And that's something that we're having a big focus on this year.
And the last words to Miranda and the dog.
Dog is asleep now after all this hoo-ha. Just in terms of last words, two things. One to guard against the worries that Phil was just voicing really clearly about the fact that you'll get that subsidised, substandard service being offered from a business link of the future. It's about saying whatever needs to be delivered by quality business to business experts. And if government chooses to put a subsidy against the price of those services going out, that's fine. But what they mustn't do is recruit themselves a substandard team into a business link of the future to undercut the quality delivering pieces. That would be really key from my side.
Thank you. Well, can I say thank you to all of you who've given your time to attend this afternoon. I do hope you found it beneficial. All us chief executives talk to each other very regularly. So, if you've got any questions you still want to ask, the answer is literally an email or a call away. So, please do make the most of the network, because we're stronger when we're together. So let's all please, really keep this going. Vic, did you have your hand up? Did you want to say something? No. Okay. So thank you all for attending. Thank you to my speakers this afternoon. And I do hope you've learned something. And just to say, the next event will be on Wednesday, the 18th of August. That will probably be a briefer one for about an hour, and that's around gaining sponsorship across the whole areas of what we do, because how I come out with looking at what we're going to do is to look at the benchmarking survey that all the chambers take part in and see who's doing well in what area. And we've got a few chambers that have done very well in actually gaining sponsorship, anything from their business support packages to their events to patronage, a whole host. So we're going to be having that at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 18th of August, but you will get details out quite shortly. So that's all from me. Lovely to see you all and see you all at the next event, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks for organising.
It's okay. Bye.